Hello and welcome back to Underlab. A somewhat unresolved mystery within Undertale is the future of the Dreamer lineage. With Asgore and Toriel divorced, their marriage in ruins, Asriel dead, and by the end of the game the monarchy having been relocated to somewhere where it technically has no power, one has to wonder what would actually happen to a royal family under these circumstances. Asgore would of course remain the king of monsters, but could he have another child? Perhaps not without Toriel, but then would she ever forgive him? Well, I already made a video about that, so feel free to check out that episode if that's what you're interested in. However, just for the fun of it, I feel like working out who would be the most likely successor to Asgore, in the event that he passed away or resigns from the throne. I realise in various neutral endings, other monsters come to rule the underground, though those are a little different as they require certain other characters to die. I'll be looking at this from the perspective of post the completion of the Pacifist run, so therefore all characters who should be alive are alive, and all characters who should be dead are dead. Well, it seems I'm under real order to get this video started sooner rather than later, so I'll just stop talking and let this slightly redundant spoiler warning play. Before I receive a barrage of comments, stating the obvious, saying that Asriel should be the heir to the throne, let me interject and say that I realise that. However, keep in mind that poor little Asriel is dead, and trust me on this, it's harder to fit a crown around the petals of a flower than you think. Let's quickly recap on everything that happened to the Dreamers up until this point, so we know where to begin. Toriel and Asgore were once the queen and king of the underground respectively, but before even that, they ruled over monster kind on the surface, as we appear to see Asgore leading an army of monsters during the introduction. Though they were defeated and banished underground, the Dreamers' rule was still respected and seemingly not called into question. This is undoubtedly because Asgore is a well-loved and respected figure, as we find out when talking to various NPCs throughout the game, though Asgore was no tactical genius and was unable to lead his people to victory against the humans. It seems like his people love him as he cares for their concerns. Unfortunately, no matter what he does, he isn't all-powerful and he can't resolve every issue he's confronted with. Asgore and Toriel managed a peaceful reign over the underground for what seems to have been a very long time. At one point, the pair had a son, the tragically destined Asriel Dreamer, the one and only god of hyperdeath in the making. Naturally, following the typical laws of succession within a monarchy, Asriel would have become king after Asgore's death or retirement through something called primogeniture. More on that in a bit. The monsters finally had some hope again, as with a young prince added to the mix, the kingdom was as happy as could be, while trapped within its prison. That's why when Asriel died, in his attempt to escape to the surface with the fallen human, Chara, or Kara, Asgore did an instant full 180 from being the fuzzy nice guy to just casually wanting to kill every human who fell underground. To be fair to him, he had a reason for it. The barrier requires 7 human souls in order to be destroyed. No matter how justified the retaliation was, however, Toriel was repulsed by it and decided to return to the monster's original home, called, well, home, now known as the ruins. She couldn't stand the sight of Asgore any longer, knowing he was ready to harm innocent lives. This left Asgore in a precarious situation. He was a king with no queen and no heir. As I mentioned before, in a normal situation, primogeniture would have determined who Asgore's successor was, and specifically it would have been Asriel. Even though Toriel would have been older and likely more experienced in the event of Asgore's passing, primogeniture is a law from feudal times that states that the eldest son within the family has the right to succession. That's part of why Asriel's death was such a grave loss. Not only was Asriel a shining beacon of hope within the underground, he also ensured that monster kind would continue to have a ruler. In many ways, Asgore was the only one holding things together underground. If he hadn't made the tough decision to go to war with humanity once more, the monsters would have no reason to believe they'd ever escape their prison, which would surely create mass depression and chaos. Of course, that was only necessary after the death of Asriel. If that had never happened, it seems plausible the monsters may have eventually found a peaceful way of escaping their fate, though unfortunately the humans had other ideas in store for them. Anyhow, on to what you're here for. With Asriel dead, who would become the rule of monster kind were Asgore to resign from the throne. Technically, it should be Asgore's next child. The only problem with that is that Asriel was his only son. Next it would go to a brother, but to our knowledge Asgore has no siblings. In this situation, the only character with any royal blood left would be Toriel. She would become queen in the event that Asgore, for whatever reason, no longer wished to be king. But even then there's problems. As we know, Toriel seems to have given up on her life as queen. Though there is a neutral ending where she takes over, would she do so under ordinary circumstances? I feel she would be inclined to look after her people, so there's a fair chance she would. However, I'd say it's equally likely that she would turn down the role, having been detached from it for so long. Who then would become king or queen? Well, this is where things get a little confusing. Technically, there's no one who by rights is entitled to the throne by this point. I think the next most likely character to Toriel would be Undyne. As captain of the royal guard, she's one of the few remaining characters with any significance within the monarchy. Considering that the kingdom was likely be in chaos by this point with Asgore gone and Toriel having turned down the role, it would be a sensible move by Undyne to impose martial law. Martial law involves the military taking the place of the government and is usually seen after civil law has broken down and anarchy erupts. As I mentioned before, Asgore did a good job of keeping his people content, though without him chaos may ensue. Undyne would have no choice but to keep the monsters under an iron grip in order to ensure there were no insurrections. Naturally, this is a slightly grim take on things, and hopefully it wouldn't actually go that far. The monsters seem like a relatively peaceful bunch, so I'd imagine them to get more upset than they would angry, so Undyne likely wouldn't have too difficult of a time keeping things under control. What about a more relaxed option though? Rather than immediately resorting to martial law, Undyne wouldn't necessarily have to take charge if someone able-bodied could fill the role of King Regent until a suitable heir is found. Typically this would be a high-ranking noble such as a lord. Curiously, no one really like that seems to exist within Undertale. Sans may have some connection to the king, considering that we find him within the hall just before encountering Asgore, and it seems as if Sans was well prepared to meet you there. That implies it isn't his first time within the palace of the king, but who knows? One character who might have some royal authority is Alphys. She is after all no mere doctor, she's the royal scientist. On the genocide path, she manages to save many monsters by evacuating Hotland before you arrive. That sort of initiative would possibly make her a good pick to preside over the throne if no better heir can be found. Her high-ranking status may also win her some ground, considering the lack of characters with noble titles whom we have to work with. It's odd to think, but the royal scientist could easily become a royal queen. I've no doubt that Undyne wouldn't see reason to complain either. She'd probably be quite content with her lover's brains on the throne. So to sum things up, the monsters would be in for a bit of a pickle were Asgore to step down from being king. The best solution would be for him to reunite with Toriel and have another child. Or maybe a better solution yet would be to simply resurrect Asriel, though that doesn't seem like it'll be happening anytime soon. Without either possibility coming to be though, it seems Toriel would be the most likely successor to Asgore. If not Toriel, then Undyne, and if not Undyne, then Alphys. This is judging by the authority and royal status that they hold. Toriel is the royal queen, and to my knowledge she never officially divorced from Asgore, so her claim to the throne should still have some relevance. Even if it didn't, I'm sure the monsters would be happy to see their beloved former queen take over where Asgore left off. If not, then Undyne might have to keep law and order through the guard force. Finally, if all other alternatives failed, Alphys could use her genius to keep things under control, and her position as royal scientist to have a tenuous but tangible claim to the crown. Or maybe King Mel could simply take charge. When he isn't making music, I'm sure his title means something. At least, I think it does. All in all, it's probably simply best that Asgore remains king for now, at least until he sorts out his little weed problem. It's surprising to think how much would be different had Asriel never died and remained the heir to the throne. It's very likely that we wouldn't really have a game to play had Toby Fox decided that was the case. What do you think? While it seems like an objective statement to say that Toriel would be the next in line, it's possible that other characters who don't have a claim to the throne might step in. For example, Metaton in his infinite popularity could possibly take over by winning the adoration of monster kind. Who could argue with him if he has an army of monsters at his side? Still, he likely wouldn't be so cruel as to do that. Feel free to tell me what you think in the comments, and whether you believe it's more likely that a certain character would usurp control if they were able to. Anyhow, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Try not to abandon any positions of authority you may have, and I'll see you next time. Before I go, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to the scientists here at the Underlab. My head scientists Nightcore Master, Zaki, Cameron Vigil, Cad Jensen, and Asgore NG, and my Underlab scientists Crystal Sleet, Nicholas Dux, Armin Arlett, Marisa Ray, Robert Sopin, Lieutenant Omega, and Kathleen Grace Feldkamp. Thanks to the generosity of every name you see here, this channel is able to keep going. If you enjoyed this video, please check out the Patreon link and the video link below that explains why I so massively appreciate your contribution.